guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to go over some stuff that we're doing to my personal car. Winter upgrades, mistakes that I made that I'm fixing. When I say mistakes, I built this car over 20 years ago. There are a lot of things that I did that if I had to do it all over again, obviously I would do it different. One of those things is how I mounted the motor plate in the car. I used to have it so that this plate was in front of the motor plate. Come right here. Right here. And what that did was, when it came time for me to remove the engine, I used to have to remove all this stuff off the front. Then I would have to take the motor plate, remove it, and slide it out. And then the whole engine could come out as an assembly. So what I did to fix that was I took this plate here and I put a slight bend into it, welded it to the original tube, and by putting that bend in it, it made it so that I didn't have to replace this whole tube and move it further back. Along with doing that, I also put a pedestal underneath right here. And what that does is, as I'm lowering the engine in, it sits on the tube in the back, right here. That's the mid plate. And now it'll sit on the pedestal in the front. And what that does is it makes it so that I could take the engine hoist out of there once it's in place and bolt everything in and not have to worry about keeping the engine suspended when I'm trying to install it. Another upgrade that I did this winter was TBM brakes. And I've already had them installed and mocked up. Then I sent the struts out to get fixed. You guys know all about that on the first video. So now it's time to reinstall. And I really just wanted to go over the quality of these brakes because I have to tell you, it's one of the nicest pieces of equipment that I have on the car or that I ever used. Come on over here. This is the rotor, already installed and shimmed. We have the brake caliper. This is the pin setup that holds the brake pads in. As you can see, these are the pads. Even the bracket is really good material and it's lightened. The quality of the stuff is incredible. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a time-lapse video of me reinstalling everything. And then we'll go on to future upgrades and I'll let you know what's going on. Thanks. With the help of my goofy buddy Beznik over here, we got the brakes installed. We got the wheels installed. Setting up spindle mount brakes are not hard, but they're time consuming. And you really have to make sure that the rotor travels right in the center of the caliper. Otherwise, you'll get rolling resistance when you go to spin it. This thing is pretty good for everything being brand new, all the bearings being brand new. Fresh grease packed in the bearings, one pass down the track, and then you jack this thing up and you'll be able to spin this for days. So we are going to put the other side together and then move on to the next thing. Hey guys, I'm just finishing up the install with the TBM brakes, and I wanted to show you something that really impressed me. This is the retaining clip that holds the brake pads in. And one of the things that impresses me besides the fit and finish is the locking bolt that locks this into the caliper. It has a clip that won't let the bolt fall out. So you can imagine when you're doing stuff in a rush at the racetrack and you're changing brake pads quick, maybe in between rounds, or maybe just taking your time after you're done racing, just to know that this little clip is here and you're not going to lose that tiny little bolt is a nice touch that they thought of when designing this brake setup. So pads are already in. Everything is lined up. Send the piece right in. Gonna lock it down, 1/4-inch ratchet. And just like that, TBM brakes are installed. And again, like I said to you yesterday, this is all new grease. Nothing's really been up to temperature. Pads aren't broken in or anything, but that's how free it spins. Okay. All right, so I want to do a little bit of a lesson on common sense and critical thinking. Most academic teachers would probably cringe over what my version of critical thinking is, but it applies to automotive. All right, so the reason why I came up with this idea to have this lesson in class is because we had a teacher come in with his truck, Mr. Pelkey. He had an issue with his windshield wipers that were not working. I don't know, did some of you guys check it? You guys did, okay. He didn't know why it wasn't working. He brought it in, and I wasn't here that day. It was the day I wasn't here, right? And they looked at it, couldn't really figure out what was wrong with it. They just kind of took some guesses at it, which is fine, because when you're not really planning on it, not a big deal. I came back the next day, he brought it in, the cycle changed, so you guys were out, seniors were in. And I wanted them to get to the point where they could start to diagnose stuff on their own. So I basically said, guys, pull it in, windshield wipers don't work, figure it out, okay? A couple of kids got into Pro Demand, brought up a wiring schematic. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. Some kids went inside and looked at the dashboard. Some kids looked at the fuse. And I just kind of let them do their own thing as to try and diagnose what's going on. Well, one of the students figured out that the fuse was blown. And as soon as you put another fuse in and you go to operate the windshield wipers, the fuse blows. You guys did that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay. So then we had a series of kids at that point when the seniors came and you guys left. I sat them all down. I said, okay, we have an issue with, you turn the windshield wipers on, the fuse blows, what do you look at? Okay. Some kids said you want to look at all the wires, make sure they're not grounding out to something metal. Very true. Okay. Some kids said there might be an issue in the switch. Some electrical connections grounding out or something in the switch. Also could be true. Some kids said that the motor itself could be bad and that's causing the fuse to blow. All correct. Okay. But diagnosing it, especially when you're getting paid flat rate, or if you own your own business and pretty much every minute counts, you want to know how to diagnose something and be the most efficient you could possibly be and not waste your own time, right? Because the quicker you fix something, the quicker you get the next thing and the more money you make. Self-explanatory. So, I told the students, unplug the motor, put a new fuse in, see if it pops. So they did. And the motor didn't pop. I'm sorry, the fuse didn't pop. So now I said, okay, it's a bad motor, replace it. But I don't really think it sunk in as to why, you know, I got busy, we got jamming, we needed to get stuff done, and I basically just said fire off and do it. And that's when I said, you know what, I really got to sit down and explain to these kids why that did the trick. Does anyone know what that accomplished? Anybody? Anthony?
It proved that there was no faults in the wiring or the switch.
Awesome. Great job. Okay, so very simply, if you unplug the wiper motor, you put a new fuse in, and the fuse no longer pops, that means you got a problem with the wiper motor, or there's a very slim chance that something electrical right there at the motor when you're moving the plug, like if it wraps around a corner and it's chafing against something metal, that by unplugging it, you might have moved it away. Chances are it's the motor, okay? If you unplug that motor and you put a new fuse in and the fuse still pops, you don't waste your time taking the motor out. You don't waste your time calling the parts store. If the fuse still blows, now you're into the wiring schematics and the meters and the whole 9 yards. I'm gonna give you a little example of when I was your age. I worked at my dad. Customer came in, had no brake lights. Now you gotta keep in mind, I'm old, so this is when we didn't have the third brake light in the middle, we just had the two tail light brake light bulbs. Pull the car in, got no brake lights, okay. I jump underneath the dashboard, I check the fuse is good. Then I get to the brake light switch underneath. I make sure I got power coming in, power going out. I start looking into wiring schematics, which back in that day, we weren't able to do that. We were like going through books and stuff and following wires and all that stuff. And my father just basically let me flounder for a while. And then he finally said to me, any guess what he might have said?
Unplug the bulb.
What's that?
Unplug the bulb.
Unplug the bulb, you're close. Anybody else? Anyone? So, we weren't very politically correct back then, but he said, hey dummy, did you ever check the bulbs to make sure both bulbs aren't bad? Because the problem is when you're driving down the road and you got someone in front of you and they hit the brakes and only one brake light lights up, they still know you're stopping. They're probably not gonna beep at you and say, hey, you got one brake light out, right? But 6 months later when the other brake light goes out, now all of a sudden you don't have brake lights and it's a panic situation. So, hey, I got no brake lights. Truth is, that person might have had one brake light for, 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever, but it was telling the cars behind them that the person was stopping. Once they lost the second bulb, oh my God, I got no brake lights. Check the easiest stuff first, okay? It's a lot harder to jump underneath the dashboard and start looking at fuses and switches and wiring schematics and all that stuff than it is to just check a bulb and let's make sure we don't have two bad bulbs. So along the same principle, wiper motor blows a fuse, just unplug the motor. See what you got. If you change something, then you know you're on the right path. If you don't change something, you're still on the right path. You just now know what path to go. When you're getting paid by the hour, you're getting paid flat rate, you own your own business, all that stuff is critical because time is money, right? That makes sense? Anybody got any questions about that? Makes sense to everybody? You guys started dabbling in electrical, so I just kind of wanted to give you, it doesn't need to be nearly as intimidating as that all the time. Okay? It could be broken down and be simplified. There are times when you're going to want to beat your head against the wall because there's going to be some crazy situations where that power wire is going through the firewall and it's chafing on something and causing the fuse to blow. And it doesn't do it every time. It's when you hit a bump or something goofy like that happens. But don't go into every situation thinking that it's going to be a crazy problem. Take a little bit of time and eliminate the basics first so you don't waste a lot of time. Make sense? We're good? All right, thanks, guys. Good? Doesn't matter, you can edit that stuff out. Hey. What's that look for? Picture of her right there on her chin. What's that all about?
I'm thinking.
Okay, are you thinking critically? So, most...
Hello, good
A good camera crew is hard to find. My key. Action. What? That's got to be a terrible angle.